Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And the moment we've all been waiting for has finally arrived.
And it caught us completely off guard.
No, I wasn't prepared for it at all.
We're talking about Prince Andrew's settlement in his civil suit with Virginia Roberts Giuffre. And I guess we sort of presumed it was going to end in a settlement, but it was just so much sooner than I had expected it would happen.
Yeah.
I thought this would be the story we were going to be talking about all year. And now we're barely 2 months in, not even 2 months in, and it's over.
Yeah, I mean, we were sitting there on Wednesday and we get like a unexpected push notification that this joint statement has been issued. And like, I'm sure everyone has read it probably several times. Everyone was probably as flabbergasted as we were. But I thought we could like go through the statement and talk about the various interesting points.
Let's do it. I'll start. Virginia Giuffre and Prince Andrew have reached an out-of-court settlement. The parties will file a stipulated dismissal upon Miss Giuffre's receipt of the settlement, the sum of which is not being disclosed. Prince Andrew intends to make a substantial donation to Miss Giuffre's charity in support of victims' rights. This is so much information in such a short amount of words. It's like 3 sentences and they've packed in everything already.
Yeah, like absolutely breathless reading. I was really like surprised that there was a donation as part of it, because I had just kind of assumed that if there was a settlement it would all just be money paid directly to Virginia. And I suppose like all money is welcome and can be put to use in these kind of situations and for these charities and organizations. But after like Andrew's total lack of sympathy throughout this whole the 2 years specifically, but his entire life, for victims and survivors of sexual abuse and trafficking, like you definitely get the feeling that there's no real like understanding coming behind this charitable donation.
Yeah, and I think the fact that there's no apology here and no remorse about his alleged treatment of Virginia, I think it comes across really disingenuous, but let's go into the next part.
Yeah, and also we should remember this wording as well. Prince Andrew intends to make a substantial donation. But yes, it continues. Prince Andrew has never intended to malign Miss Giuffre's character, and he accepts that she has suffered both as an established victim of abuse and as a result of unfair public attacks. This is like absolute fucking bullshit. Like, never intended to malign her character when like there was all that stuff about how she was like looking for a payday and how she was was it like a sex pot or sex kitten or something? Like all of these pieces that were very much trying to malign her character in the run up to this trial.
And that were linked to Fergie.
Yeah.
And I think, we'll point out here that this is not an admission of guilt, but I guess that's maybe kind of to be expected with a settlement agreement. But as we talked about before when we were talking about the possible outcomes from this case, this kind of case and this kind of settlement are, I guess, much more common in America than they are here. So the way that you or I or another, random British person would view this settlement is very different to the kind of exact legal implications and this very clear lack of any admission of guilt.
Yeah, definitely.
The next part is, it is known that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked countless young girls over many years. Prince Andrew regrets his association with Epstein and commends the bravery of Ms. Giuffre and other survivors in standing up for themselves and others. Like, it was known that Jeffrey Epstein had done this back in 2010 when Prince Andrew was pictured going for a walk with him in Central Park.
Yeah.
And staying in his house. It was only 3 years ago, not even 3 years ago, when he did the Newsnight interview, and he said he didn't regret his association with Epstein because of all the useful things he learned and all the important people he met, as he told Emily Maitlis.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolute fucking bullshit. Like, to be friends with someone who is a convicted sex offender and only now say that you regret that friendship after, there's been a lot of hassle for you personally, Andrew, as a result. Like, that is what he regrets in this.
I also find it hard to believe that Andrew would willingly commend Virginia's bravery, given what a massive fucking pain in the arse her bravery has been for him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the statement ends, he pledges to demonstrate his regret for his association with Epstein by supporting the fight against the evils of sex trafficking and by supporting its victims.
Does this mean he's finally going to speak to the FBI about Epstein as he said he would all those years ago?
I mean, I wouldn't be holding your breath for that. You know, like we said, if he's going to be contributing financially, that is great. Like, take his money, take as much of his money as you possibly can.
That's fine.
But, like, what organisation is going to want to have him involved in any kind of visible way? Like, you know, he's done this settlement now, which we're going to talk about in great detail now, but, like, he has not, in the court of public opinion, cleared his name in this business.
Whatsoever.
Yeah.
And to many people, this will have done pretty much the opposite.
Exactly.
I think hearing this for the first time, I was so shocked. Even though, as I said, we expected that there would be a settlement eventually. It seemed like this was a sort of saga that had been going on for so many years. And then to have this very abrupt statement, no fanfare around it, it felt quite strange.
Yeah, I was like reading it almost in a daze. Like, I was trying to read it as fast as I possibly could. I was like skipping over it. I was like, this surely can't be like the end of it. But it was.
Just looking everywhere for more details, but those have sort of dripped out in the days since. But it just seemed, I don't want to say anticlimactic, but this was the end of, what we'd been waiting for so long.
Yeah. I mean, I think, what we should say is that our overwhelming reaction to this is like being delighted for Virginia.
Oh, of course. This is such a massive victory for her. And I'm sure Airheads listeners will know this already, but Andrew is just the very epitome of the kind of person that current justice systems in the US and the UK are built to protect. So for her to be able to get this settlement and get what she wants in this situation is a massive triumph for her.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to applaud her and commend that. I've heard people's frustration definitely over the last week around not just this settlement, but the whole settlement process in general, saying that it allows the mega rich to escape justice. But I do think we have to avoid making Virginia's case all about dismantling all these oppressive systems that she suffered under for so long. It can't just be her responsibility. It's not one woman's work at all. So yeah, instead we should be applauding and celebrating the way that she has navigated this very flawed system, and one that isn't designed to support her or help her really at all.
Yeah, and I think I had sort of hoped that there would be more of an apology out of this statement, if not an outright admission of guilt. Despite that, I still think it is written acknowledgement by Andrew that Virginia has suffered, and it's a way of forcing him to financially support victims of sex trafficking, and a sort of, a very blatant U-turn on whether or not he regrets his association and his friendship with Epstein. And, those are just some of the many hypocrisies and inconsistencies in this case that will, you'd hope forever change the way people think of Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. We asked a lot of our listeners on Instagram what their main questions are about the settlement and about everything that has kind of happened, because we had a lot of questions and you guys definitely had a lot of questions as well. So we thought we'd kind of go through some of them.
I mean, you guys all had the exact same question.
yeah, and they were
and the same question that you and I had.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. But the big one is how much is it and who's paying? But we'll get to that in a little bit. We're going to start with how the news was received in the UK.
I'm sure people that follow royals at all will have seen the front pages the day after. It was on every front page, the splash. It came totally out of the blue, but it was all the papers were talking about, especially because it was quite hard to get concrete details on it. So they were relying on various legal sources, palace sources, and everybody was kind of saying slightly different things.
Yeah, the Mirror had the most detailed exclusive with regards to the money and the amount of money and how the deal was reached. And we'll get into all of that. But there was pretty much immediate speculation about how much the Queen would be involved financially. And with that came the kind of expected sympathy for the Queen being let down by her favourite son, all that kind of narrative as well. That was a big part of the coverage, I think.
Yeah. And I think, just to get into some of the more technical elements of it.
And, like, we aren't in any way legal experts, so this is just, like, our understanding.
Yeah, and just from reading around in newspapers,
yeah.
explaining this to us, we've tried to compile it in one place. So, to begin with, isn't this an admission of guilt? No.
Yeah, and I think that's, like, one of the main reasons possibly for reaching a settlement. It's that there's no court record of any kind of guilt or wrongdoing. So it wasn't a surprise to me that the statement wouldn't implicate Andrew or even say that he had met her.
Yeah, and I guess that is technically the outcome of the lawsuit, but I don't think that's fully taking into account the reputational damage that Andrew has suffered. People rightly are wondering, why would he pay so much to somebody that he claims he's never met?
Yeah.
And at the same time, why didn't he proceed to a full trial, which would have been the clearest way to prove his innocence and clear his name?
Like, I'm pretty sure it's the easiest thing in the world to prove you're at Pizza Express for a birthday party. Like, there's just so many avenues you could go down to, like, find corroboration for that. So it's very striking that they didn't feel that this should go to a trial.
So why isn't Andrew in jail? Does this go on his record?
So jail was never an option in this because this was a civil suit, which comes down to financial compensation rather than criminal record. So even if he had lost at a trial, he wouldn't have gone to jail, and I don't think it would be reflected on his criminal record in any way.
But Tom, how can Andrew get away with no apology? Like, won't he have to admit that he lied about never having met Virginia?
I mean, this is, like, definitely something that confuses me about the American legal system and the civil suit thing in general, is that, like, you can be found to be not guilty of something in a criminal court, but then have to pay damages in civil court for stuff. So it is kind of confusing. But I think this is part of settling, is that you say, we're going to give this money, we don't admit to actually having done anything wrong, but we want this case to go away.
Yeah, and I think Emily Maitlis wrote a really interesting piece for the BBC. She's obviously the interviewer that did the Newsnight interview, and she talked about how seriously they took that interview because they felt it was quite likely that the case wouldn't go to trial, whether due to a settlement or the case being dismissed. So the interview was probably going to be the closest thing that we would get to Andrew's testimony, and it was, astonishingly candid. So we'll always thank God that we have that incredible interview. So she said that given Prince Andrew says he doesn't remember ever meeting Virginia, there are only 3 possible explanations then for the settlement. 1, either he was lying in that response and actually remembered her well. 2, he genuinely had no recollection and was adamant they hadn't met, only for his memory subsequently to be jogged later.
Right.
3, that Andrew maintains his innocence but feels the weight of legal and public opinion against him now makes settling the easier option, albeit without accepting any liability.
So, this is a very good, concise way of putting these 3 options together, I think. Like, the third option seems like...
very generous.
Very generous, and I don't think...
that's not going to hold water with most people, I think.
No, because...
you'd have to be the most extreme monarchist.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, in this settlement, I get the feeling that the general opinion is that he has not proved his innocence and that he is paying to make this go away. So yeah, I don't think that option 3 is a goer for me, but 1 or 2, probably 1, I could get behind.
Why didn't he settle earlier, though, before he lost all his honorary military titles and indeed his dignity?
Well, I mean, that comes down to the arrogance of Andrew, doesn't it? I
would say so. Like, I feel like he just has such terrible judgment and is so surrounded by people who, like, people who similarly don't want to tell him the bad news. What was that guy?
Like Good News Gary or Good News Greg or something? Yeah.
People who are paid to only tell him the best possible outcome. So it does seem probable to me that it maybe didn't cross Andrew's mind at all that he could lose. Yeah,
because he has, like, the yes men, but he also has, like, all the systems that are in place to protect people like him anyway. So, like, it's almost, like, not an unreasonable assumption that he would get away with something like this.
And it's sort of been dragged out for quite a while that now, I think just very recently, possibly due to fear of being deposed or perhaps pressure from his family, spurred him to settle at this, pretty late stage.
Yeah. And definitely the stuff about the family has been really stressed, I think, in press coverage recently, that like Charles and the Queen were like desperate for this all to get shut down well in advance of the Jubilee. So another question you guys had was, did his lawyers bully her into a settlement so that details won't come out?
I don't like this question. I think it's quite a difficult one for us to answer. We obviously have no knowledge of any legal scenarios or how these kind of negotiations typically play out.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem like the reasons to settle would be to avoid being found guilty, to stop certain details coming to light in a deposition, or to save money on the payout if you feel like you can't win. So I think it's like reasonable to assume that they didn't want details coming out in a deposition. But I don't really want to say that Virginia was bullied into this settlement, because we've like absolutely no way of knowing that. And I don't really want to feel like I'm taking this victory away from her by saying that this is like not a great outcome for her, because I think it is a good outcome for her.
And, at the moment she has agreed to not talk about the terms of this settlement for the time being, so just until after the Jubilee celebrations, basically. But doesn't mean she's gagged from talking about it forever. So she could possibly address this in a later interview or possibly in a book. I don't think we've heard the last from her on this.
Yeah, no, I agree. But like the biggest questions were all around the money. And those were the questions that we had.
Who's paying?
Yeah.
And how much are they paying?
As we've said, and as the statement says, both parties have agreed for it to remain confidential.
I know, and like immediately after, we were like, okay, somebody's going to, like, the Mail, the Telegraph, everyone's going to be trying to find this out. And it was so interesting, sort of, in the hours afterwards, like jumping between all the different publications as the number kind of was going up and up.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, it's 7 million, it's 10 million, it's 12 million. 12 million seems to be the most widely reported figure at the moment.
Yeah.
So that would include Virginia's legal fees and a 2 million donation to her charity Speak Out, Act, Reclaim. And this number was cited a number of places, but the Sunday Times quoted a source close to Andrew who said it was out by millions. So, as we say, it is speculation from anonymous, unnamed sources.
Yeah.
But that's what we're gonna take as.
And I think like even if it's not the official number, it should give us like possibly an idea of like the breakdown of funds, and it gives us a figure to talk about, which is good.
But Tom, does Andrew have £12 million?
Yeah, so you're asking about his net worth and where he's getting the money for all this, and trying to find out how much Andrew is worth is really tricky.
I mean, is that any surprise? Like, this is the Queen who lobbied to get an exemption from a law so she could conceal her private wealth. Is it any wonder that we wouldn't know the net worth of anybody in her family?
Especially the dodgiest son.
The most kind of interesting figure that I could find was Bloomberg reported that his bankers at the Luxembourg-based Bank Haviland put his wealth at £5 million in 2017.
And yeah, like there are other numbers that are floating around in the internet, like celebritynetworth.com, which has £3.67 million as his net worth. The Mirror mentioned reports that he has an estimated fortune of £32.5 million. No idea where they're getting that number from, though. And there's another list on theriches.com that gives his net worth as over £60 million. But
it's a total mystery.
Yeah. I certainly don't think that his actions, from reading other reports around this, they don't give the impression that he has £60 million lying around.
Yeah, famously bad with money. And, while we don't know the details, we do know that Andrew's official sources of income in recent years have been his military pension, which is around £20,000 a year, and then an annual payment, pocket money from mummy, of around £250,000.
Yeah. He's also been selling this ski chalet that we've talked about before. It's a chalet he bought in 2014 with Fergie and didn't pay for, basically. And the reporting around this sale was that it was all to pay for his legal defence. But while The Guardian says that the sale is expected to generate many millions in funds, the maths doesn't necessarily really add up if the settlement amount is as high as it has been reported, given that he still owes £6 million of it to the former owner. So,
give me the maths.
So he bought the chalet with Fergie for £17.5 million with a £13 million mortgage. And as the I newspaper puts it, the proceeds from that deal and their final destination are unclear, i.e. like he still owes part of that money to the former owner and there's other fees and stuff involved, with the total net profit likely to represent only a portion of the settlement. So it's interesting, but it is also speculation, like
everything else.
Everything else
episode.
about everything about royal finances. But this report in the Mirror says that a source with knowledge of the complex deal, the settlement deal, suggested that it was only signed after Andrew was able to provide proof that the remaining funds would be available from the chalet sale. And the same source said that the deal was complicated by the insistence that Andrew place the money into an escrow account used by the third party to keep the funds safe before they make the final transaction, which I think is so funny. Like, he's a royal, but you need to actually make sure he has the money he says he has. Like, it's such like a, I don't know, like Dickensian character or something.
Yeah, and like even if he did get all this money from the chalet, it does seem that he needed some additional help topping up the funds, because according to the Mirror, the Queen did agree to assist with funding on one condition. Quote, as long as she was not connected to any personal payment to Ms. Giuffre.
Right, okay.
Which is the most not getting her hands dirty way of putting it. So instead of her making this settlement payment to Virginia, the Queen is alleged to be making the £2 million donation to Speak Out, Act, Reclaim.
Yeah, a royal source said she could not be seen to be making a payment to a victim of sexual assault who accused her son of being an abuser, but the deal was structured in such a way to arrange a sizable financial contribution to the settlement by way of a charitable donation instead.
Shenanigans.
Yeah, like the whole fucking deal was designed so the Queen could help out, allegedly.
This, like, finicky, working it out so the Queen keeps clean the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's really gross.
Yeah. But, like, if this is true, then the wording of the statement seems incredibly misleading when it says that Prince Andrew intends to make a substantial donation to Mr. Frey's charity. Like, Prince Andrew does not intend to make a substantial donation, because apparently the Queen will be doing it, allegedly. But some of you were suspicious as to why the money was being paid to her charity and not to her. Like, just to be very clear, there are two payments we're talking about here. One is directly to Virginia, and the other is this donation to her charity. So it's not all going to her charity.
According to the Mirror, anyway.
Yeah. I had, like, initially presumed that the charitable donation bit was a stipulation of hers, because I thought it may be related to when her lawyers were saying that she wanted to make sure the outcome of this case benefited more survivors than just her alone.
It's still possible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it certainly seems like it could be a bit of creative accounting from the royals as well.
I could see that too. I think the sort of biggest question that surrounds the issue of who's paying is, if the Queen is paying, will her contribution be from her private funds or taxpayer funds? Yeah,
certainly in the UK, that is the big question.
I think this is a big problem for the royals, because Buckingham Palace has declined to comment on any of the reports that said she would be contributing to the settlement from her private income from the Duchy of Lancaster estate. So we just have these reports in the British media that quote unnamed royal sources saying that's where the money is coming from. Like, you would hope that if she's making this donation, then it's coming from her own private funds.
Yeah.
Like, there's absolutely no way, and I think it would be an outrage if they tried to justify using money from the sovereign grant to pay this settlement.
I know, like, I think there would be protesting in the streets if this happens.
I mean, you'd hope.
Well, yeah.
But I think this will be a problem for the royals until we know where the money is coming from. And Andy MacDonald, the Labour MP for Middlesbrough, has said he's going to raise this question in Parliament. He said, "This is a person of very high profile involved in a case where his position of authority and privilege has been allegedly abused, and it is an enormous sum of money. We don't know the precise figure, but there's a risk that this will be at the public's expense. So we need to have that resolved. We need to know exactly where this money is coming from. I'm going to take the opportunity to raise this issue in Parliament because the issue isn't going to go away until people have that information and receive assurances that public money is not going to be used in any way contribute to the settlement.
Obviously, we definitely need to know where this money is coming from. And I think if they don't clear it up, it will be hanging over them, and it should be hanging over them until they make it clear.
I mean, one word we never associate with the royals is transparency.
Yeah.
And I do sort of have this feeling, because people have come to expect this opaque finance business from the royals, that people are maybe happy to never hear where this money's coming from. And if enough time passes, they can just assume that Andrew sorted it out somehow, maybe in a dodgy way, but the Queen kept her hands clean, and that's nothing to do with her, and certainly nothing to do with taxpayer funds.
Yeah.
And I think until we have that question answered, this is going to be something that really gets to me, and to you probably as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, I also think that if this comes from her Duchy of Lancaster money, I'm still going to be really fucking pissed off about it. Like, I find it really hard to, like, separate the Queen's personal fortune from her position for, like, a whole load of reasons.
But Tom, she's just so good with the horses.
She gets it all from betting on the horses.
Yeah.
But like a big part of that is that we're told that she has this income from her private estate, the Duchy of Lancaster, and that that's hers to do whatever she wants with. But there's like a big problem with describing the duchies as private estates. Like, they are just parts of the crown estate that the royals didn't give to the government. Like, I'll just very briefly do a little history of the Crown Estate, because it is, I guess, a bit boring, but I think it is important.
We've talked about it before. I think it's interesting.
Yeah. So historically, the Crown Estate properties were administered by the reigning monarch to help fund the governing of the country. And then in 1760, George III surrendered control of the estate's revenues to the government, and that relieved him of the responsibility of paying for the costs of the civil service, defence costs, national debt, and his own personal debts as well. Then in return for this, they set up the civil list, which is what we now call the sovereign grant. It's like a precursor to that. So basically what's happening here is the Queen's private income is from a property portfolio that was historically used for public benefit. And like, that's before you even get into like how much royal money comes from like slavery, looting, and other kind of colonial atrocities and royal pastimes from history. Like, you know, the whole coffer is...
It's all dirty money.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think, you know, one of the things that some of our listeners had said to us is like, you know, not trying to defend Andrew at all, but shouldn't the Queen pay, since Andrew and other royals aren't allowed to make their own money as members of the royal family?
Well, I mean, I think like a quick answer to that would be like, first off, if you don't have the money, then you can't make a settlement like this for alleged £12 million. Like, you know, the problem with settlements is that the super rich can buy their way out of trouble.
Yeah, like you or I couldn't do that.
Yeah, exactly. And like, if you don't have the money, then you have to face the music. And, you know, if Andrew doesn't have the money because he can't have a normal, proper job, then, you know, he can't make the settlement. But I also have a problem with this idea that Andrew and other royals can't make their own money.
He can make his own money.
Yeah.
He gets his pension, like we said. He gets that yearly allowance that's about 8 times the average salary in this country. And, you know, people like to forget that in 2007 he sold Sunning Hill Park, a house he was given as a gift by the Queen, for £15 million. And that money seemingly vanished.
Yeah. Like, don't fall into this trap of thinking that because these people can't have like normal jobs, they can't make money. Like, rich people make money in so many ways that like you or I don't have access to, or like probably even know about. So like, they're fine for cash.
Yeah, and it seems like Andrew can make money. He's just not very good at holding on to it.
Yeah. And, you know, that means that, like, if the Queen is paying for any part of this, then that is her decision and it's freely made. Because Andrew could be taking out a loan. Like, he's taken out loans before in the past, and it's probably quite an attractive solution for him because he's also not had to pay off those loans in the past. Like, he took out a £1.5 million loan in 2017 that was paid off 11 days later by companies linked to one of his friends, who's a multi-millionaire Tory donor and financier called David Rowland.
We talked about him before.
There is a reason why he hangs out with loads of financiers. But yeah, there are options is basically what I'm saying.
I talked already about how Virginia might speak about this later in an interview or a book, but, just to answer the question of whether Virginia will be able to talk about her experience, according to the Times, both parties have seemingly agreed to a period of silence until after the Jubilee celebrations in June, but there's no indication that she will stop talking about it forever. What's really been glaring to you and I with all this is all the focus on the Platinum Jubbly.
Yeah, the fucking Platinum Jubbly.
And how we can't spoil the Jubbly. And everything is about protecting the Queen's big party.
Yeah, if you ever need to be reminded that the royals value their own, position over justice for victims of sex trafficking, then, this really is it. They literally value...
Who's surprised?
Well, yeah, no one, I'm sure. But they value the Jubbly party over anything else, it would seem.
Because the Jubbly party is their best way of salvaging the monarchy at this point.
Yeah.
They need it to be a success.
Yeah, they definitely do. It's often, linked to Charles, these kind of concerns about whether the Jubbly party will be ruined. And I think, yeah, like you're saying, they've taken so much reputational damage over the last 2 years that they really need to, correct the trajectory of public opinion. Otherwise, it's just going to keep going down.
Yeah, and the way to do it is to emphasise the Queen and the Queen's legacy and the Queen's impeccable career on the throne. And, try to smooth things over for Charles when he takes over.
Yeah.
So I think, as much as you and I would like this to be the beginning of the end for the royal family, the sort of suddenness of this settlement and the unanswered questions about the sum and who's paying for it and where that money's coming from, that just all leads me to think that no, this isn't the end.
And... the fact that there is no admission of guilt as well,
And no apology.
I think it's, unfortunately, an easy thing for people to now move on from. And it makes me, sad as an anti-monarchist that this will probably fade in people's minds and memories. But, it's incredibly important to remember that it's not Virginia's responsibility to bring down the British royal family at all. And... she has done what she needed to do for herself, and that is what's important here. And there's a lot of people talking about how oh, well, if Andrew had been deposed and if there was a trial and all of that would have given us incredible ammunition for, destroying the reputation of the monarchy and potentially bring it down. But I think it is probably more productive to look at and remember all the things that she has given us in the course of this incredible story, which, she had to be so unbelievably strong and brave in the course of this. I can't really imagine how she did it, but out of it we've got the royals paying millions of pounds to settle with a woman that Andrew insists he never met, which is incredible. We've seen Andrew fleeing across the country to avoid being served legal papers and hiding in his mum's house. He ended up doing that fucking Newsnight interview off his own bat because he was so scared about everything. And as I said, her own story itself, it's so powerful. So at this point, it's not to do with Virginia. It's about, I think, the onus is on us to remember these things and not move on from them if we want to keep the pressure up on the royal family.
Another big question people had was, is this the trade-off for Camilla Parker Bowles becoming queen? Because, Tom, you and I were stunned by this announcement on the eve of the 70th anniversary of the Queen's accession to the throne. She put out this statement in which she said it is her sincere wish for Camilla to be known as Queen Consort when Charles becomes king.
She's clearly been reading my diary. It's also my sincere wish.
No, you don't want anybody to be queen, no. Tom.
It really, this statement coming out when it did, with that timing, so linked to the Jubilee, it really suggests that this Platinum Jubbly is just as much, if not more, about preparing for the future of the monarchy as it is celebrating the Queen's reign and legacy, which means it's about Charles.
Yeah, it's like they've been soft launching Charles's reign.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
were wondering what the hell is going on. Like, did they have the Queen under the gun to get her to say this about Camilla on her big Jubbly day?
Yeah, because it's like, it's such a controversial topic. People have been like talking about this.
People feel so strongly about
Yeah.
this.
Like, I just want to be very clear that, I agree with the people saying that Camilla should not be queen. But I also think that Elizabeth Windsor should not be queen. And I think that Charles shouldn't be king. And I think that the monarchy shouldn't exist. Like, I think if you're quibbling over whether she's going to be princess versus queen consort, it just seems to be like this bullshit distinction that I think is probably grounded in like a lot of internalized misogyny.
I think a big part of it is, people have such loyalty for Diana and they think what Diana should have been queen and that Camilla doesn't deserve to be queen because she was a mistress.
Yeah.
Like, that to me is beyond comprehension. And I think seeing the kind of hate that people have for Camilla, it's so obviously rooted in this very ugly misogyny. Like, even the things we have to delete every week on our social media, it's all about how Camilla looks and obviously we hate that kind of criticism of Camilla because it's just so appallingly sexist. But I think it's also extremely disproportionate to the dislike of Charles.
Yeah, people are fine for Charles to be king, but they don't want Camilla to be queen because of the way she looks and because they blame her more than him for cheating on Diana.
I mean, I wouldn't say people want Charles to be king, but he should be the one bearing the brunt in this instance.
I get it. People love Diana and people don't like Camilla, but I just think it's like blown out of all proportion, and it bugs me.
Yeah, it's not a slight to Diana.
No.
It's just the fucked up logic of the system of monarchy.
Yeah. But like, as we were saying, the royals have taken like a big hit in terms of the public opinion of them recently. So making an announcement like this about such like a controversial topic, it doesn't seem like it would serve their best interests. Like, as the Jubbly message, it's a bit of a flop. So why did they say it? Is it perhaps because they needed to get Charles on board in order to do something to do with bailing out Andrew?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories out of this week, and some of them are compelling, because it does seem so strange for the Queen to mention this in her statement. So one of the theories is, would the Queen have signed off on this statement so that Charles in turn would sign off on the amount of money needed for Andrew's settlement? In which case, I ask, why the hell does the Queen need Charles' sign off to spend her own money? I mean, her own money.
Yeah.
But, no matter how much Charles wants us to believe he's in charge, the Queen has never needed Charles's permission for anything.
She's got the checkbook. Like,
She's the big boss.
Another theory is that Charles is the one who's giving Andrew the money to keep the Queen out of it completely. And I think that maybe makes more sense, especially because of all the stuff that's been made known in these kind of articles we were talking about through royal sources, that she isn't contributing, or at least can't be seen to be
She's keeping her hands clean,
contributing.
and Charles is getting dirty instead.
Yeah, like, I think that makes a bit more sense. Like, it does feel to me like Charles must have given something up in order to get this statement about Camilla. But I'm just like not 100% sure I know what it is.
I mean, it does show up how much wealth these people have, and maybe actually it's just not a big deal for Charles to give Andrew like £10 million to sort out this issue. But to me, it just seems like, why would he? Why would he do that?
Well, there was a year when he made like £1 million just off like
robbing graves.
Robbing graves, basically, in Cornwall. But one thing that we do know is that this is not the end of embarrassing legal trouble for the royals. Like, only hours after that Andrew statement, we got a push from the BBC that the Metropolitan Police will investigate claims that Prince Charles's charity offered honours help to a Saudi citizen. So that's the story that was like central to the Cash for Honours scandal that surrounded Charles's charity, the Prince's Foundation, last year.
Yeah, and the Met Police have said they're investigating alleged offences under the Honours Prevention of Abuses Act of 1925, but that there haven't been any arrests yet or any interviews under caution at time of recording anyway.
Yeah.
And the investigation follows the assessment of a September 2021 letter which related to media reporting that alleged offers of help were made to secure honours and citizenship for a Saudi national. You might remember when we talked about this.
Yeah. It's the guy in question is a businessman called Mahfouz Murray Mubarak bin Mahfouz, and he's reported to have donated money to restoration projects that are of interest to Charles. He's not accused of any wrongdoing himself, and he denies any wrongdoing. So this is like, the focus is on Charles and his charity rather than this guy.
The charity has said it would be inappropriate to comment on an ongoing investigation. It also reiterated its previous insistence that Charles had no knowledge of the alleged offer of honours or British citizenship on the basis of donation to his charities, that apparently Charles is president of the foundation but isn't involved with its governance, and the charity's trustees oversee the day-to-day activities.
Yeah, like a handy little reminder of how little work the royals actually do, even when they're the fucking president of a foundation.
So this basically all goes back to Michael Fawcett.
Yeah. And it's understood that the charity is continuing to offer its full cooperation to the police. And according to the Telegraph, Charles has said he is willing to speak to detectives if necessary. Is he borrowing a line from Andrew?
I think in the long run, this, maybe won't really touch Charles, because it does seem that he's kept some distance between himself and any of these decisions, at the very least on paper.
Yeah.
But I think, the Sunday Times had a story today about how Harry had tried to put distance between, that he had also sought donations from this man for Santa Ballet, and then he tried to put distance between them because he felt like it was starting to get into cash for access problems.
Yeah.
And, if Harry could see that and Charles couldn't, that really raises questions about his judgment. And at the same time, it's just another fuck up that's going to ruin the Queen's Lovely Jubbly party. By the way, if you haven't seen this merchandise
it's
with
so
a typo for the Queen's Platinum Jubbly.
Yeah, we put it on our stories when we
Yeah.
saw it, but look it up. It's really good. The illustration they use of the Queen is incredible as well. She has lizard eyes.
But since I mentioned Prince Harry there, we should talk a bit about, people were very excited about the sighting of Prince Harry and Princess Eugenie at the Super Bowl in LA, wearing masks.
Yeah.
And this was a few days before Andrew's settlement news came out. And it seemed to me like it could also possibly be part of some kind of coordinated effort, a cleanup job maybe, to keep attention on other members of the royal family, more popular members of the royal family.
Like, we were taken by surprise by that statement, but obviously the royals, certainly Charles, would have known it was being drafted and everything, so it would kind of make sense. And it certainly seemed to be good PR, at least for Harry, this appearance. Like, he was out doing something sports related, which, is always like good luck for him. He was with a family member, and I think it was like talked about almost like as a updated version of the kind of scenes that people really like from Harry's youth, and that a lot of people seem to miss. Like, according to Omid Scobie in Harper's Bazaar, during the game's halftime show, Harry and Eugenie were spotted by onlookers dancing in their seats to hip-hop and R&B anthems from Eminem, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, 50 Cent and Mary J. Blige, songs that would no doubt have been a reminder of their days partying together in London.
Good grief. I would hate if any onlookers saw me dancing to Mary J. Blige. I'd simply die of cringe. But I think this was striking to me because one of the stories we had heard about Harry and Eugenie was that Eugenie was reportedly pissed off that Meghan told family members about her pregnancy at Eugenie's wedding, and that Eugenie basically cut off Harry and Meghan. So clearly she has moved on from that, if it was even an issue in the first place.
But yeah, like, this is a good look for Harry, but could it also have been part of some plan, possibly helmed by Charles? Like, it doesn't really hurt to send Eugenie and her family over to California for a holiday, especially when you get images like this that's like happy family spending time together, like no rift here. And I think, like, with all this focus on Charles being the one kind of calling the shots, and using the Jubilee as like a time to secure the future of the monarchy, he must realise that he needs Harry and Meghan on side, even if they're on the bench most of the time.
Oh, sports.
That's my Super Bowl sports metaphor. So I hope you enjoyed that.
Such a great command of the jargon. But I think, if that is the case, it maybe doesn't seem that Harry is like fully on board with the plan yet.
No, because like he's at the same time currently embroiled in a legal dispute with the UK government over the security that's available to him when he's in the UK.
I can't believe this is all happening in 1 week.
Yeah.
You might remember that back in January, Harry applied for a judicial review regarding his access to police protection. This was prompted by a security incident last July when Harry was chased by photographers leaving a charity event while he was visiting the UK, when he was over for the Diana statue unveiling.
The Fiona Bruce statue unveiling, yeah. But it became clear to him apparently at this point that the protection available to him in the UK was not adequate, and his team released a statement in January that outlined their concern about not being able to replicate the protection offered by the police. And I think some of the coverage at the time assumed that this meant the use of firearms. And I think that could possibly be a concern for Harry and for his team. But the information that's come out from this hearing on Friday was focusing more on the fact that his security team does not have access to the same kinds of local data that the police would have access to, which I think is a much more palatable for British listeners or British royal watchers avenue to take than Harry wants some guns.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was really palatable to our listeners as well. And
I apologise. Sorry.
We had already heard from Harry's legal representative that he had offered to pay the cost of police protection himself back at the Sandringham Summit in January 2020, but that the offer was dismissed. And this judicial review is supposedly Harry's way of questioning that decision.
Yeah, and we have some idea, due to a skeleton argument that was circulated at this hearing, of what the Home Office's argument to dismiss the case is. They argue that personal protective security for the Prince is still considered by UK authorities on a case-by-case basis due to his exceptional status. So it depends on the reason for his presence in Britain and the functions that he carries out while he's present in the UK.
So if he's here doing engagements...
Yeah, I guess there are certain engagements that would qualify him for police protection, and there are others that...
He can't have it all the time.
Yeah.
Though. The Home Office also said that Harry failed to afford the necessary measure of respect to the Home Secretary and RAVEC, the Royal and VIP Executive Committee, which is a task force of civil servants and Scotland Yard officers, and that he failed to afford them respect as the expert and democratically accountable decision maker on matters of protective security. They also said that offer of funding that Harry made at the Sandringham Summit was notably not advanced to RAVEC when Harry visited in June or in any of the pre-action correspondence, but that basically in any case this offer of private funding was irrelevant.
Yeah, their lawyer said, personal protective security by the police is not available on a privately financed basis, and RAVEC does not make decisions on the provision of such security on the basis that any financial contribution could be sought or obtained to pay for it. Which, yeah, well, let's get into it. I think it's a pretty thorny issue, and I can't make up my mind fully on kind of how I feel about it. Of course I want Harry and Meghan and their kids to feel safe when they're in the UK. That kind of goes without saying. And they're certainly not responsible in any way for the disproportionate amount of threats towards them compared to other members of their own family.
Yeah, and we've talked before about how the Queen has reportedly intervened to keep Andrew's £300,000 a year security detail at the taxpayers' expense. That makes us so angry, of course.
Yeah, and we definitely hear all these arguments that Harry and Meghan shouldn't be denied things that are so freely given to other members of the royal family, and especially members of that family as undeserving as Andrew. So I do understand where that anger is coming from, definitely. But I also don't like the idea of Harry going against a democratically appointed governing body of experts.
Yeah, and he comes off as a spoiled brat here, with the Home Office saying that he didn't afford the respect to this democratically elected body of experts. Like, if he was just like being rude and disrespectful to these people, it sounds like the little prince came along and for the first time in his life he wasn't able to get what he wanted and he threw a tantrum, which is a really bad look, I think, for Harry, given that he is so far away.
Yeah.
I think also part of this comes down to the idea that Harry says he offered to pay privately and the Home Office says that he didn't, because he seemed like, it seems to me, from what I understand, that Harry made that offer at the Sandringham Summit, so he made it to the other royals. He didn't make that offer to the Home Office. I mean, regardless of the fact that it was irrelevant, it means that you have one side saying a completely different thing from the other, so they're contradicting each other, which makes it more awkward and more tense.
Exactly, especially, you know, if you were giving him the benefit of the doubt, you could say maybe, like, Harry believes he told the right person about this. He believed that saying it to the Queen is, like, as good as you can do with a request like that. But, like, I suppose just it wasn't the right way to go about it. And I do think the idea of the wealthy being able to buy actual police protection, regardless of expert opinion on the matter, like, even if in this instance you think it's justified or you think that it's a celebrity that you like or whatever, like, I don't think that's a good situation to be in. And I was, like, really relieved to see that statement from the Home Office that says that they don't take into account financial contributions when deciding who gets police protection.
Yeah, and obviously I'm not interested in defending police.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But I don't think the Home Office is trying to, you know, purposely put Harry in danger. It would be a fucking disaster for them if anything happened to Harry or Meghan or the kids over here. Yeah. Like, it would be a full-scale catastrophe if anything happened to the Sussexes while they were in the UK. Yeah, absolutely. I think they're following whatever handbook they have for these kind of things. But maybe, you know, I'm definitely open to the idea that this handbook needs refreshing. Like, I'm happy for them to be reviewing things on a case-by-case basis, but we do need to know and make sure that they take very seriously the extra, very real level of threat on Harry's family specifically that comes from, like, racist, nationalist and extremist parts of the population. Like, and I think that is an issue that I would like to see discussed more openly, or, like, because that is something that sticks out to me in this case on Harry's side. Yeah, and I think this is probably going to be something that's very important to Charles. Yeah. You know, and perhaps the Queen as well will want to have the Sussexes at the Jubbly celebrations so that they, you know, namely Charles, will probably want to get this wrapped up pretty quickly. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what kind of influence Charles can have on legal proceedings, but I definitely 100% agree that he would want to get it sorted. I think it's important to realise that, like, as much as it will come across to some people as, like, Harry kind of having a tantrum over his security, this seems to me to be very much a problem of the firm's making, because this wouldn't be an issue if Harry and Meghan had been allowed to keep working in an official but reduced capacity, which is what they said they wanted. So, like, this whole mess is actually, when it comes down to it, on the Queen, Charles and Will. Just the Queen. Well, yeah. It all comes back to the Queen. It all comes back to the Queen. So, yeah, thorny issue, I think. Yeah, and I think all of this happening so soon after the start of the Queen's Jubilee year, it's off to a very bad start. I thought it was very interesting. The Sunday Times had a piece where they talked to royal sources who were saying, like, it's like we want to have a big party, but nobody's really in the mood. Yeah. Which is exactly what it feels like, but they're going to keep trying to force the Jubilee celebration, and really the only thing people care about is that they get a 4-day bank holiday. Yeah, exactly. And I guess planning the new platinum pudding. I do think, though, this is going to mean a lot more pressure on the Cambridges. Yeah. Because it's basically all on Kate at this point. Like, the Jubilee's got to go well, but after that, Kate's got to be the saviour of the monarchy, basically, because everything rests on her. And we're starting to see things like she's going to be doing a solo trip to Copenhagen, which I think is very notable, that she would be doing something like that on her own. And then later in March, Will and Kate are planning to travel to Belize, the Bahamas and Jamaica. fascinating.
Apparently the royals are hoping this is going to stop other Commonwealth realms who are thinking of following in Barbados' footsteps by removing the Queen as their head of state. Like, is it such a good idea to send the brains behind very much not a racist family on this particular job?
But I think, you know, that whole tour is going to be so interesting to see who they'll be talking to, where they're going to visit, what organizations they're spotlighting, obviously who and what they wear. You know, all that stuff is just going to be quite a minefield, I think.
There's going to be like a level of calculation, I think, hitherto unseen even in royal tours on this evil holiday they're going on.
Yeah, because, you know, after this Andrew thing, I was like, oh, okay, do we just stop the podcast now? Like, what is the point of doing our podcast anymore? But, you know, we'll stick around at least because I want to see how this tour plays out.
Yeah.
And if they can save the Commonwealth with, you know, a nice dress or whatever.
But until next time, thank you so much for listening.
And we hope you have a great couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Do you regret the whole friendship with Epstein?
Now, still not. And the reason being is that the people that I met and the opportunities that I was given to learn, either by him or because of him, were actually very useful.